Hi, I'm Jessica,
Hi, I'm Seun.
and we're introducing our podcast to all the girls who have moved before.
We're two Nigerian girls who moved to London, and we've come together to have conversations with women who've moved from point A to point B.
Whether that's a new country, career, friendship, or marriage, any big life event, we're here to talk about it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of To All the Girls podcast, TATG podcast. Yeah, and today we have a very, very special guest whose name is Gisi. So Jessica and I have known Gisi for years and years and years. Not that many years, but 6 years in total. So that's a really long time. If you count our internship period, it was actually six and a half
7
years.
years. Oh, yeah.
7 years actually, yes, because we're getting to June now, right? So Gisi, do you want to do like a quick intro and then we can get into the question?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Gisi. I've known Jessica and Shay from work. We met, I think it was at a burger restaurant very close to St. Paul's on our first internship day. We ate lunch there together very randomly. We became friends with the internship and we got much closer when we went to New York to do our job orientation. Yeah, and then for me, I'm a software engineer, same as Jessica. I'm Albanian. I moved to London for my job, so like nearly 6 years ago. And yeah, I've been in London since. Is that a good introduction?
I think so.
That's a great introduction.
Yeah. So, thank you for telling us you're Albanian. How many countries have you lived in?
So, yeah, I was born in Albania, I was raised in Albania, and then I've always really wanted to go abroad for my studies because I wanted to study computer science. I knew that very early on. And then I was very ambitious with my choices. I was looking at MIT, given that I really wanted to study computer science, and then I had to downgrade from that.
Not a downgrade. Like, sorry to your alumni. What you call them? Okay.
So because of like financial reasons and because MIT rejected me, I had to look at other options.
I like that the rejection was the second reason.
Financial reasons first.
So I was looking at other countries in Europe that have a much more affordable education system than the US. And Germany was a really good option because it has this English-speaking university, so the education is very similar to what you'd get in the US, very similar curriculum. It's very, very international, actually. That was kind of like my introduction to other cultures, like my real introduction to other cultures. And it's very small, and it had a very good computer science program in the past. I think it still does. Kind of like the core reasons why I decided to choose it and move to Germany, in Bremen, northern Germany. And then that was my first move. My second move was Scotland. I did an exchange semester there in Aberdeen.
I didn't know that.
Oh, really? And then it was London for my job. That's it.
And I want to dig into all of these different countries, but can you tell us a little bit about what it was like growing up in Albania and how that's different from the different countries that you've lived in?
Yeah, so Albania is a very interesting mix of Southern Europe and Eastern Europe. And you guys have never been.
Whose fault is that?
Yes, Gisi.
Yeah, I wonder why.
Whose fault is that?
Slightly mine, because I don't want to deal with all the organizing. But yeah, I would say Albania is a very interesting country, historically speaking. But also, culturally, because it's in Southeast Europe, so it is an interesting mix of what you'd find in Eastern Europe and Southern Europe. Growing up there, it was a very humble upbringing. Come from a very humble family. I grew up in Tirana, in the capital. I went to really good public schools there. And then for high school, I won a scholarship to go to a more private high school, which kind of opened my doors to studying in English and then just pursuing education outside of Albania. I think that was very key to doing that. Yeah, I was just surrounded by a lot of love growing up. I was outdoors most of the time. as you guys probably gathered.
Yes.
And yeah, I always knew that I wanted to leave Albania though. That was always like ingrained in my brain.
Interesting.
I
How
ha-
was your experience? Sorry, Shay. But what was your experience moving from a non-private school to private school?
Public schools in Albania, at least at the time, were very overly populated.
I mean,
As I guess is in a lot of countries. But I felt quite good there, I'd say. I felt quite good with the education that I received. I didn't really know anything else, so I didn't really have an interface to anything else. And then to the private school, well, the biggest change was that the private school, the high school, was just girls only. So I guess that was a big change. And then obviously the studies were in English rather than in Albanian, which I guess was something to get used to. I was forced to learn a bunch of other foreign languages because the school was funded by a Turkish foundation, so that was also something to adapt to. Don't really have anything insightful to say that.
well, the reason I asked is because I've heard all types of things, and in every country here in Nigeria as well, the public school experience, private school experience is often very different, not just in the education system, but also in the type of friends that you have, for example, the kind of kids that end up going there. Sometimes people have weird experiences of, I've heard about being the kid on scholarship in a private school, and I was just curious if
Yeah, that's true. I think the one that I went to, which unfortunately is closed now due to political issues, but the one that I went to, a lot of people were actually on scholarships.
That's
They
great.
were like merit-based scholarships because they were quite competitive schools, and everyone who wanted to get in had to compete. So I think in that regard, not really. It was easy to adapt, but most of the people who were there were from other cities in Albania, so that was kind of my first, again, kind of like door to becoming friends with people from other cities outside of Tirana, which was not the case in a public school. And also most of the girls in the school were like also living there, so it was a boarding school. Well, for me, I just packed my bag at the end of the day and went home. So that was kind of like the difference there. And it was a bit of, now that you made me think about this, it was a bit of like a differentiation between people who stayed there and people who
the
just
day
like went back
students,
home.
I had that as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know.
My secondary school also was like we call it boarding and day. So like if you went home every day, you're like a day student, and then if you stayed over, you're boarding. Yeah. And there was this whole like, oh, the boarding kids are so cool, and you day kids are.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point.
No, I mean it was definitely similar for me as well. I guess boarding was just a bit more interesting. It was fun, you didn't have your parents with you. Whereas today it was sort of like, oh, you just go home at the end, and it wasn't as fun being in school, and maybe you weren't always inside on the gist and the drama that was happening because then you went home every day. Okay, no, that's really great to hear about your upbringing and, your first venture into cultural differences. So, taking you back, you're, in Germany, you landed first day in Germany, you're about to start university. What are you thinking?
Fun fact, that was my second flight ever. So it was when I was 18. The first one was to go to Romania for like an informatics Olympiad. And then the second one was when I was 18 to go to Germany to move there. And I was by myself, not with any of my parents or with family. It was very hard, of course, to say goodbye to my family, and there were a lot of tears involved on my family's end.
No, your end.
I was always trying to be the strong person. It was. I was super, super excited, but I remember that the first day that I arrived there, so the university that I went to also cooperates with locals in Bremen and kind of recruits them as volunteering host families if they wish to do that. And I was assigned to a host family, a German couple actually, a retired German couple who are lovely, and I'm still in touch to this day. And they actually came to the airport to pick me up because I arrived one night before the start of the university, before the start of boarding. So I stayed at their house that night. And even though they were very lovely, I just remember landing in Bremen, so gray, even though it was the end of August, and the buildings were gray. I was like completely by myself, of course, I guess with two strangers that I had just met. And I went to their house. Their house was super cute. but they slept very early, and then I was just left by myself with my thoughts one day before, just like missing my family. But after that, it was very, very exciting the next day to go to the university. There was an orientation week at the beginning, which is so important to like meet all kinds of people. And I think the fact that to this day, I really appreciate the fact that we all stayed on campus, because that way we just got so much more connected to one another, and it was so much easier to have that community feeling rather than not staying on campus, which is the same for you, right?
Yeah, but like the family you were attached to, how did that work? Like
they were volunteering to become, I guess, a host family of people from this university, and typically they just checked in every once in a while. They came to the university sometimes to have lunch with me.
They have kids.
Nice. They did. They do.
Oh well.
So they had kids working in finance, actually, funnily enough, at Morgan Stanley. It came full circle, and they invited us. So me and the other person that they were being host family to invited us for Christmas, which was very nice with their entire family. And yeah, I think it was a very good window to German culture as well, because the university that I went to was extremely international. You didn't even have to learn German really, and you barely met German students on campus because most people were not German. So this was kind of like a really good intro to that, I would say.
Tell us about German culture. How would you describe it in your own words, and how is it different to all of the other cultures you've experienced?
Yeah, I guess it has a lot of stereotypes.
It does, yes.
In my case, I have to mention it was very much a bubble. The university experience was very much a bubble because the campus was kind of removed from the city. You always stayed on campus. Typically, you're quite busy. You don't really leave the campus. And it was very, very international, so you didn't really get to interact a lot with Germans.
Yeah.
But in my experience, just everyone that I met that was German presented themselves to be very humble. They always say, "Oh, I don't speak English well," but they always speak English so well. Also, I would say very welcoming, and this comes from a white woman. I don't know how the experience is for like other people, but it was easy to like blend in, I suppose. Definitely not as easy as it's been in the UK potentially because of the language barrier. But yeah, I had a very good time in Germany, I would say. Looking back.
Interesting. The point you made about how they say I don't speak very good English, I had that experience, but in the opposite way, where they're like, I don't speak good English, but they speak really good English and they didn't want to help me. In Berlin, yes. I think it might be city specific, but that was quite the experience.
Maybe. Yeah. There are a lot of stereotypes from city to city in Germany, right? The smaller cities in the north versus cities in the south versus east. Berlin,
same here, right?
Yeah, same here, I suppose.
Fun fact, in my secondary school, which was in a very small city in Nigeria that most people have never heard of, we were forced to learn German. Which is why I started with that. I do not speak it. I was forced to learn it for 3 years. So yes, I do know like basic greetings and conversational, like how are you? I'm good. Can you point me to the station? Is that the
Jessica, can you do us a favor and speak some German now? Nope. I feel like I need to hear a conversation.
That's a no for me.
That must have saved you.
So this is why I went to Berlin on my own with so much confidence, because I was like, what do you mean? I did 3 years of German. I can do this. And then I arrived. I have told you a story before, where from the train station to my hotel, if I took a taxi, it was like maybe, I don't know, 30 minutes. But I was like, I want to get on the metro, I want to have a feel of the city. I speak German, like, what could go wrong? And I get to the station, first things first, the machine to like buy a ticket is all in German. And to change the language, you need to know German. I successfully navigated this. Again, confidence booster, bought my ticket, got on the platform, got on the train, and that was the beginning of the end.
Wow.
One stop from the airport, ticket master conductor guy comes along and he's like, "Oh, where's your ticket?" And with all confidence, I pull out my ticket that I have purchased and paid for, and he says, "It is not validated." And I'm like, "What do
Oh.
you mean?" So apparently in Germany, which everybody, please listen to this, note this. When you buy a ticket, there is a machine on the platform somewhere that you have to walk down to put your ticket there and have it stamped. And then you can get on the train. If you do not do that, you pay a €60 fine.
Oh my God.
It doesn't matter that you already bought this ticket. It doesn't matter that you were just coming from the airport, as I pointed out. And I literally showed my stamp. I was like, "I literally just got into your country." And he says, "Well, what country are you coming from?" And I was like, "England." And he said, "When you're in Germany, you act like the Germans. When you're in England, act like the English." And I said, "Thank you very much." And I paid my €60 fine. After many tears, I actually cried because it was the last cash I had on me. But yes, that was my welcome to Berlin. After which I was very, very careful. I would not cross the road if the green man did not show. I was very, very like, I'm sticking to the rules. I'm acting like a German because I am in Germany. But otherwise, I think I had a pretty good experience. Just that and maybe one or two incidents, but I really liked it.
I remember your pain.
Yeah.
It happened to me too in Berlin.
Yeah. I went online. I thought I was calm, but apparently it's a very common. They literally target tourists, close to the airport. So
not great.
know this, and
Fun fact about Germany.
Yeah, exactly.
Super interesting. What was your experience like in Scotland? Just because we spent some time in Germany.
In Scotland. In Scotland, I was only there I was there after the internship in London that we all did. In 2018, I was there for 4 months, and I chose, I guess, the worst time to go to Scotland, from September to December. So the days were extremely short, and I was in the very north in Aberdeen. Again, very similar experience. I remember, I think I got a taxi from the airport to go to the university, which I very rarely used to do as a student. And it was all grey, just all grey buildings. And I, again, found myself saying, "What did I just do?" But I was very, I was very conscious of my choices. The experience in Scotland was quite interesting, although short. I think I grew a lot as a person there. I have reflected quite a bit on it back. I feel like as an exchange student it's quite different when you go as a freshman, because everyone else is a freshman, but as an exchange student, of course, you are coming in new to very established classes, very established communities of friends and circles. So you're only there for a short period of time, and it's I guess maybe harder to blend in rather than as a freshman when everyone else is a freshman. That was interesting. I took it very seriously, I would say, in my exchange semester. I chose Aberdeen because it had, I guess it still has, really good NLG, Natural Language Generation program. And at the time, during my studies, I was very focused in NLP, Natural Language Processing, and Natural Language Generation. So I really wanted to go to Aberdeen to take these classes, obviously a bunch of other classes. And they never really show up on your transcript what grade you get. It's just pass or fail. But I was very determined to do a good job, and also very curious about that. Spent a lot of time studying. I remember Scottish people being very lovely, and always, especially like service people, always calling me love, which has never happened to me in London. I don't know if
they do it in London. Well, maybe it's because I now live in the outskirts, but they do it quite a bit. Well, the farther you move out of London, I guess.
Not central.
Yeah,
I remember them being a very big sports center in Aberdeen, like a really good gym, and that's when I started my strength training, I would say, where I took it more seriously. And just very short, grey days. think that was kind of my experience
I,
in
I,
London.
I, wa- I want to ask you about London, but I feel like I'm going to get a similar answer of, oh, it was
So
great.
great.
I mean,
No,
for
actually,
sure.
not true.
Oh,
I firstly came to London in 2017 as a tourist, so 1 year before our internship. And I was extremely excited. London has been on my bucket list since a child because my aunt, who I love very much, left Albania for London, and I always heard her descriptions
I love
of
when you have
London.
this aunt that is like living this life that you're like, I need
Yeah.
to.
yeah. That's the aunt we all aspire to be,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
of course. And she always obviously spoke about her experiences in London, and I was just very very curious about London. I think maybe differently from the other two places, I was just simply very curious about London. So I was very excited because of it as a tourist, and then of course when I came to live here for the internship, and I really love it. I'm still in love with London.
Wow. 7 years later.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a very cute story.
Uh, cute because I don't know that I'm still like in love with
Yeah.
London, but I think it's nice to hear like someone else say that.
I guess.
Obviously London, yeah,
Mhm.
sorry, go on.
No, obviously it has its own problems. I think every time I come back from a trip, it's interesting because I appreciate London even more. I recently went to Borneo and to Malaysia and to Singapore, eastern part of Malaysia, and I don't know. Every single time I go traveling, typically outside of Europe, I come back with a much bigger appreciation of London. Not that I don't have a good experience in those other countries. It's just that I grow to appreciate London even more because things typically work. And I guess to me as an individual, this matters a lot. I feel. I think probably the language is also something that makes a big difference. And also, I feel quite free in a way in London. I don't really yeah, I'm not the same way in other countries that I travel to,
Would
strangely.
would you say you felt that way even when you came as a tourist?
I'm not sure. When I came as a tourist, I was a very like open-eyed 19-year-old who didn't know much, and yeah, I was just simply very excited. I don't think I was being very, you know, reflective or insightful at the time.
Yeah. I asked that because is it the feeling of London being home to
Mm,
you? Because just like Shay, I'm like, it's very grey, and because of that, like, obviously, summer is the best. London is the
yeah.
best city in the world in the summer. I would never be anywhere else. But then for every other, I don't know, 9 months of the year or 10 months of the year, it's very bleak. And because of that, I keep thinking, do I want to be here permanently or not? But just like you, anytime I travel and I come back, I'm like, I'm so glad to be back.
Mm.
I feel like that feeling is because it is my home. I'm very comfortable here. But you might be onto something that is actually the city. Who knows?
I think for sure it has become home over
Yeah.
the time, and there are things that still annoy me about London. It's not like very idealistic situation,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, there is certainly a pull to it, and I become much more appreciative when I see how things are in other places and how things are here.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Singapore, and I actually,
Yeah.
because I think Singapore is so similar to London that I almost counter your point of, things don't necessarily work in some of these other places. I, which means that I do agree with Jessica's point that it might be because London is home to you, because Singapore and London are so similar. Like the metro, like we just discussed with
Did you guys go
Germany,
to the
like
same place?
We
I mean, Singapore
go,
is such a yeah,
yeah.
it's a city country. It's yeah, it's very small. So
For
I
sure,
think
yeah.
chances
Things
are we're
work
in
in
the similar
Singapore.
places. Mm.
Yeah, things definitely work in Singapore. I didn't feel that it was very similar to London though. Maybe to Canary
Really?
Wharf,
Okay.
probably because of the architecture. It was like a bigger, fancier Canary
Fair
Wharf.
enough.
But it and surely it has green spaces. I think they've done a very good job actually. Very impressed with how much they try to like integrate green spaces. And there is a lot of I don't know if you went to Sentosa Island, Shay, but there was a lot of no, there was a lot of things that seemed quite nice, but also fake in a way. I don't know how else to describe it. It's also a country with a very interesting history, so of course that's a big difference. But I just feel much more stimulated in London from just the different cultures here, and you go from one neighborhood to another, and you feel like you're in a maybe different city. If you go to Greenwich and if you go to Covent Garden, you think you're in two different cities. So I think that's something that I get stimulated a lot from in London, rather than I don't know a country, a place like Singapore, given that we spoke about.
No, I think that's fair. I didn't go to Sentosa Island. I was told to steer clear, so I'm glad that I didn't go. But I think that there were like other pockets of culture as well in Singapore. Definitely got like a feel that it felt like London because there was an amalgamation of cultures, maybe not necessarily like global, but at least Asian. I think it really sort of cut through like all of those cultures. And I did go to places that felt like Shoreditch sometimes. Lots of it does feel like Canary Wharf. So I definitely see what you mean as well. I want to ask a slightly different question, Jessica. So did you want to ask something?
I don't know. I'll just ask quickly because it's still on
Okay.
travel, and then so you have traveled quite a bit, and I was going to ask you about that later on. And you're not afraid to travel alone. I think it's one of the things I've always admired about you. Admired and feared, I have to say, because it's like you can pack up, you can go anywhere on your own, and you don't really think too much about it. Do you know like how many countries you've been in off the top of it? Do you have to count?
Yeah, I have to count.
Okay.
But I mean,
Right.
it's not that many, frankly. In Europe, I visited a lot, but outside of Europe, I've only been to Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand in Asia, Peru in Latin America, and then the States.
And I know you have Latin America on your bucket list, like
Yes.
still.
And Africa. I'm so excited to go to Africa as well.
Oh yeah. Okay, you haven't been yet. Okay, have a chance to go this year. So, okay, good. Is there anything that specifically triggered your wanderlust?
I think growing up in a place like Albania, which is a very homogeneous country, probably has had to do with that. I did not travel, as I mentioned, the first flight that I took was to Romania, which is still in the Balkans, when I was in high school. And then I traveled a little bit in the Balkans, and then Germany obviously was like the first kind of window to Central/Western Europe. And then after that, as a student, I traveled quite a bit on a budget, of course, in Europe. And I think I was simply led by curiosity. In Europe, of course, there is so much to see, there is so much history, but there comes a point when you want to see what else is out there. As you know, I love nature, so there is so much more to see in other places as well. And everywhere that I go typically is related to some sort of like nature adventure that I want to do. And then just get a grasp of the cultural side of the country as well. But it's typically related to nature, I'd say.
Fair. Yeah. I'll let you ask a question.
No, I mean it's similar, right? So we've just talked about the places that you've lived in, and we've also talked about some of the places that you've traveled to. I presume that you've made friends in all or some of these places. What are some of the friendship/culture shocks that you've experienced as a result of these travels?
Interesting. I have actually, because of solo traveling, I think you are just much more approachable as a person. And also, you yourself are maybe not everyone, but you yourself are typically more inclined to go and just like talk to people rather than if you were with a group of friends or with your partner. At least that's what's been the case for me. I think a really good way for me to meet people, potentially become friends with them during the trips, has been either through walking tours, just like random walking tours, if I'm in a city, or hiking groups with who I do like a long hike with. That's been really good. I think because of that, a lot of people that I meet are other travelers rather than actual locals. But I have met locals as well, and obviously it brings a lot of insight when you see how people, when you really get a good grasp of how people live in the place where you are at. Recently, as I mentioned, I was in Borneo, so in the Malaysian part of Borneo, a friend of a friend got married, and I kind of crashed in the wedding as well. It was really, really interesting because I'd never been in a Malaysian, like Chinese Malaysian wedding before. I think what was a cultural shock maybe would be the fact that everything seemed just much more quiet than, I don't know, the Albanian Southern Europe weddings that I have been in. There was no dancing involved after the evening ceremony, which was, yes, something that was new to me. And of course, it was in a Catholic church as well, which I'd never attended before. So that was quite interesting. And then definitely the Chinese tea ceremony that they do as part of the wedding with a lot of like little traditions was eye-opening. I think I lost track of your question though, in terms of...
No, I think, yeah, culture shock. So this is actually super interesting for me because I had a similar one when I went to well, similar, not really, but when I went to a wedding in Morocco. I don't know if I've spoken about it on the podcast yet. Yeah, that was such a different experience to Nigerian weddings, but mine was mainly in terms of the food, like the food situation. It came out very, very late. We just sort of filled ourselves with snacks from when we arrived at the wedding at 8 p.m. till when we left the wedding at 2 a.m. We hadn't gotten our dinner yet. I mean, I didn't, that was such a shock. But I think actually you bring up a good point that like weddings are a really good way to observe culture. There's definitely like birth, death, marriage, I think are the three main pillars of, I suppose, culture in a society. I remember my aunt telling me when I told her about my boyfriend, now fiance, who is from a different culture. And she's like, oh yeah, it's all well and good. Every single day, you guys might not really see the cultural differences. But what happens when someone gives birth? What happens when someone dies? Like, what are the rites that you need to follow? Then what happens during the wedding, right? So, very interesting. Is there anything else that you've come across?
That's a very, very good point, actually. No, not really. I just thought about something that has always crossed my brain every time. It has not been many times, but every time I've been to Asia, something that I'm really impressed by is how committed and dedicated people are to their job, whatever the job might be, whether that's someone who makes your coffee or a driver. I'm always very impressed with just how dedicated they are to doing their job very well. And always being very smiley and just, I guess, very, very welcoming. That has been something that maybe is not really the same in Albania, or at least maybe because I'm not a tourist in Albania. I don't know if a tourist treatment is different, but I think I see some level of optimism in that society more than I see it in the Albanian society, for example, which is much more pessimistic and cynical, at least again from my experience. That's something that has been quite interesting and fills me with a lot of joy, I guess, whenever I travel.
So I have another. So I don't know if this is not an inappropriate question, but when you say things like, "Oh, I'm going to I'm going hiking with a group that I just met," all of the red flags just go off in my head. And there's a joke that I guess most people in the African community make, like that we're not, this is not activities for us, it's for like other people. Have you ever met like a non-white person at these activities?
Yes.
Really?
Wow. Yes, for sure. In Peru.
Oh, where are they from?
Colombia. So
close enough to Peru.
Yeah, she was one. Wait, let me think. Definitely a lot of white people. We should talk about the circumstances of these hiking trips, right? They are typically targeted to tourists. There is a lot of white tourists in these countries that I've been into.
Sure.
So that's something. And I'm sure that there has been many others. I just became friends with a black guy in Malaysia, actually, in a rainforest expedition.
Rainforest expedition.
Yeah,
What country
he
was
was
he from,
lovely.
if I may ask?
From the UK.
He grew up in the
He
UK.
grew up in the UK.
You see.
Yeah.
Well, like Jessica, let me ask you a different question. Of like, so the people that you are thinking about when you think like, oh, they wouldn't do this, what are they doing instead?
Good question. So, I was actually going to highlight this as well. I feel like the holiday experience for a lot of like the kind of people Gisi goes on hikes with, I guess, like the kind of very curious and inquisitive type of people is quite different from the tourist experience from the people I'm thinking about, where like, I don't know, instead of going on a hiking trip, would like they'll go to a luxury resort
Right.
and they would like maybe do one of these tours where they like drive a classic car around the city.
I think about yourself.
This is not, I promise you. Okay, let me think about it. Honestly, I think that most Africans that I know that have traveled, well, I don't want to lean into stereotypes, but there's this joke that like Nigerians especially like to spend a lot of time at malls when they
Right,
travel,
right.
which is insane, but actually a thing. Like people travel to go shop a lot, which is just completely different experience. But I'm not even talking about those type of people. I'm talking about people that actually genuinely would say, I want to see the country, but hiking would never come to their mind. Literally, they would go on like a nice, fancy, oh, let's get in, a
A
jeep and
boat
explore the
cruise.
jungle. Yeah, or like a boat cruise, and I can stand far and like take pictures of the, little islands.
Scenery, yeah.
Yeah, those are the type of people I think of that even, I don't know.
What do you think
Yeah.
that is?
Well, I can write it. Off the top of my head, I just think it's a bit good and bad, sad, but growing up, how I grew up, or most people grew up in Africa and Nigeria, like some of these things that shouldn't be a luxury are actually luxuries. So, like the opposite, where you have to stay in a house or a place without electricity or water, it is not something you think of with pleasure. Like you think of it as like suffering, and you're constantly trying to get out of that. So the idea of taking your money to willingly pay for an experience that starves you of like electricity and like things that you have grown up imagining are luxuries, like you wouldn't just do that. And it's not something that you would find cute. But and mosquitoes as well are a real thing, which is why we
Yeah.
avoid the
Real
jungle.
thing. Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably one of the reasons. But otherwise, like I don't know.
To your point.
The
No,
the
I was just going to
sorry.
say, I think there's space for both because when you talk about those people, I almost feel like now I sort of lean both ways. Like I'll go to a country and I'll do the really fancy, smancy stuff. But then I'm also now, very, very recently, I should point out, like gravitating towards this like nature-based stuff, the adventure stuff.
Same actually.
And yeah, I think it's pretty much what you're saying, Jessica. At the point where I was before, where I didn't want those things, it's because they were very similar to my situation at that point in time. Whereas now I'm a bit more comfortable. I'm a bit like I can pay for luxury, which makes me want to experience maybe something different, and just be more in touch with nature. And I think maybe that has to do with like growth as well. Destigmatizing some of these nature trips and adventures as well. There's also the culture of like your parents saying, I don't want you to do XYZ, I don't want you to do ABC, and you sort of have to, break away from the mold and like try experiencing something because you want to do it rather than not doing it because someone else doesn't want you to. So
That makes sense. It's more like opening your mind and just actioning on it. We have a lot of friends with different experiences. One that I have in mind would always choose resorts and luxury
Yeah,
holidays
exactly.
instead of hiking, despite having a very different experience.
True,
So, yeah,
true.
it might be preferential.
Yeah, definitely. But I would agree as well. I mean, I think that's a big part of it, but also there is like safety. Maybe because people like us have been out there doing that again and again. There's not many people to look up to and say like, oh, this person was able to do it and they did it safely, and then that means that I can do it, because what you don't want to end up is like, I don't want to be a hashtag. And just like she
Actually,
said, like
no, I was just going to
sorry.
say, like, we should also talk about the flip side of, like, why are these white people not going to luxury places, and what are they trying to prove by always being on the nature trail or always seeking adventure or going to Africa to cradle a starving African kid and putting it, like,
We
what are
should have
they
another
living
episode.
for?
I have this is I think it's another episode, and then
Yeah.
it wouldn't be fair to like talk about it without having a rebuttal from the other end. We should try to get balanced perspective. But I would say that being living in this country, being exposed to like you or like other people that are actually into these things has made me curious. First time I went on a proper like hike was with you and Shivi and and Shay, and that was quite an experience. And it really made me curious. When I went to Vietnam, I did go, I wouldn't call it a hike, but we did like a boat thing, and then you had to hike up some like, I don't know, it was like a 3 hour thing, to the top of the mountain through a cave and then come out, catch your boat back. It's quite a nice experience, although I would say I didn't enjoy being stopped a lot for pictures.
Oh, that happened
Oh
in
my
Vietnam.
gosh.
Yeah, which
Interesting.
was, one of the reasons why I probably would not do these things. But I do like that I did not deny myself of that experience. Had a great time. Found something interesting where there was a random rock like shaped like a tortoise or something, and people apparently would rub its head and like drop money on it to like wish it to get like good luck. And tons of, honestly, I was calculating how much was being dropped, and I was like, this is an interesting business opportunity. I could carve a rock as a tortoise, and like people would just shell out. But yeah, very different, culturally in Nigeria. That is good. That's very different. People wouldn't do that.
But in Italy, though,
Yes.
you do have like Trevi Fountain, and it's a similar sort of thing, and people
Fair.
throw their coins and hmm,
Yeah, I guess there's a
also something there
spiritual
to
connection.
unpack.
Right, right. Okay, moving on. We have, sorry, Casey, for like putting you on the spot with that, but that
It's okay.
was, worth exploring. And for our audience, like, we hope that this conversation like kind of makes you think, like, are you the type of person that you're not willing to try something else or something new? It might be worth reevaluating why you make the choices that you make when you go on holiday and thinking about a different kind of experience next time.
Yeah, for sure. I guess that's a really good way of taking advantage of traveling. Really important. And embracing solo traveling potentially if you feel safe to do that.
Yeah. Have you ever felt unsafe as a woman?
Yes, in Thailand. I don't know if it was just in, I mean, sure, I think it was just in my brain, but it was just walking back home in Bangkok. Yeah, I just did not feel very safe. Might have been my state. Nothing actually happened. It was just late at night, very dark. Yeah, might have been like the mental state that I was in at like during that day, rather than anything that triggered it. I'm not sure. But frankly, I've been very, very fortunate, very lucky, which might be a bit scary because it makes me keep on doing solo trips. It's just that's something that I really enjoy and I get a lot out of. So I don't want fear to kind of stop me from doing what I want to do, essentially. That's why I keep on doing them.
Yeah.
But I have been very lucky. Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. That's a nice positive story to hear. We have spoken about culture shocks in like your travels. How about culture? So one thing I wanted to highlight again for the audience is that Gissy has very diverse friends. As much as I don't like to use the word
Oh my
diverse,
God,
it feels
yes.
like we're at a networking, career
These
recruiting
days we
event.
should be using the word diversity much more
I
because
don't
of
want
what's
Trump to
happening.
like arrest me or something. It's illegal now to say DEI. But yes, so I've noticed that you have friends from like different countries, different cultures. Is this something that you actively when was it?
Like
Was it past tense? Yeah,
Seeking.
looking for it. Yes. Did you go seeking for it? And then I also wanted to ask because you mentioned that when you switched to your high school in Albania, you liked the fact that most of the girls that were coming from outside your city, and the same thing in Germany. You said they were very international. So it seems like there's a theme, you know, where and it's not a bad thing. I think it's great. Like from when you were young, you were curious about other people. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but anyway, did you go out actively seeking this?
Growing up in Albania, there wasn't really any opportunity to do that. Maybe things have changed over the past few years, but yeah, growing up there, it's a very homogeneous society. You barely really meet foreign people. Again, I should say in the past, things have changed now. So it was a very, very much, I suppose, narrow experience in that regard. I don't know if it was the same in Nigeria. You're not, yeah, not sure. I haven't been to Nigeria yet.
Yeah, I'll talk a bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely moving to Germany was pretty much my door to other cultures and just welcoming people in my life who have very different experiences from me and potentially who look differently from me. So people from other cultures, people who are not white, people who are not Albanian, which is kind of like the diversity element. I don't think I made an active choice, frankly. I think it was external factors, so just the environment of the university, the fact that the university was extremely international. People everywhere in the whole are from just different countries. So I think the external factors helped out a lot with it. And I suppose that maybe curiosity element to just learn from people who are different from me initially. But frankly, in London, I think the internship might have been just like a proximity factor and just external factors that our class was also quite diverse. So there were people from all sorts of different countries and different cultures. So I think that impacted. And then just feeling much more connected to certain people despite who they are, right? Despite how they look like. Or maybe because of it. I don't know. I don't know if it's despite or because of it.
I so I hear what you're saying. I think you need to give yourself a little bit more credit for you make it sound like it's passive, and that might be because of who you are as a person, but I don't think that's because of what the situation was. So maybe if I can ask the question in a slightly different way, which is thinking back to the people that you were around growing up in Albania who have also traveled, do you think that they have the same level of diversity in their relationships as you do?
Okay, yeah, I see your point. Potentially, there is like a choice element to what you are implying as well. Um, I think if I just look back in university, I'm sure you might have had similar experience. There were always circles of people who just stick to people from their own country. So that was certainly the case in my university. In my university as well, Albanians like me who joined my university, there were many of them who basically stick to Albanians, and we're just had like close friendships with Albanians. And same thing goes for from other countries. So maybe there was a proactive element to it. I suppose I just
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I have to give you
I
credit for that.
I agree because I think for me, looking at the internship, which was my first introduction to, or not introduction, but that was the place where I really felt immersed in different cultures. I didn't feel nearly as comfortable interacting with people who weren't of similar backgrounds to me. It took a push to start to talk to people, and it did not come naturally. And I think there are people in our intern class who did stick to the cultures that they were from as well. So it's definitely a proactive thing looking in to your experience.
Yeah, that's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I stuck to. I did try to. I'll give myself grace. I did try. Like, I was during the internship. I was extremely open to. Like, I was talking to everyone. I was doing things with every
Yes.
single person. There's just people I ended up gravitating towards. I guess it turned out they were all like me in many ways. But I would actually also argue that it wasn't for me. And when you said, "Oh, might be similar in Nigeria," so I grew up in a place called Calabar. It's in the southern part of Nigeria. It's a very small city compared to Lagos. And the first time I went to Lagos, I don't know if I don't know if you watch Hannah Montana, but
Yes, nothing.
yeah, there's a song I can't remember this song. There's a song she had where she was going to a big city and she was like popping her hair out the window and was like so fascinated about that. Was me the first time I went to Lagos. Like I was like, oh my god, the first time I went to a cinema was in Abuja. I was like maybe 12, between 10 and 12. Like that is how crazy that was. A cinema was fascinating to me. When the way that I grew up and the people that I had around me all thought the same way, similar to what you're saying, very homogeneous, very like, honestly, the people that are still there, hope they don't listen to this, no shade to y'all, but you have not changed. Like, I feel like they have just the same, they are very used to that lifestyle. They don't want any, but I wanted to meet other people. I wanted to know what life was like outside of Calabar. Like I was so curious all my life. I was like, I need to get out of here. And so when I went to Lagos, it was like very new experience for me, like very different kinds of people. And it was also kind of similar when I came to London. And even though I was still meeting these people, for me, it was still very different mindset from people that I grew up around. And then I then compare that to like different race, different culture, different like country, like so as it was a lot for me. So I think I took many steps down and I was like, okay, I'll just stick to these people that I'm, kind of okay with. But yeah, I mean, I think kudos to you because it's not just in the type of friendships you have, but in friendships in general, you are very intentional. You would follow up, you would organize stuff, you would say, let's do this, let's do that. It takes someone who genuinely likes people to do that. And many people don't like people.
Are you one of them?
I will be honest, I'm self-aware.
Sounds like Geezy has a grievance that she wants to air as well.
I'm self-aware, we all have our weaknesses and our strengths. So let's focus on my strengths today.
You're making me feel very good about myself.
No, you should.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, I think you made some really good points there, and it's very. I mean, it's human nature, right? To be comfortable with who you are around and to basically go to what you know. And it's just how humans work.
Yeah, that's true.
No issues with either way.
Oh, okay. It's been such a great conversation. Shall we round it up?
Yes, but sorry, I did want to ask one question. For most of our audience that might not know this or live in Europe, you have mentioned like Eastern, Southern Europeans, and like I just wanted because it's a thing that I didn't know was a thing until I moved here. I don't know if it's really a thing, but like I get along more, unfortunately, with fortunately and unfortunately with like the.
Say it.
I don't want to say that, but to rephrase, I find similarities in, I would say, African culture and Eastern Southern European culture. And I was just wondering, like, I should probably read this up. I shouldn't ask you, but can you clue us in on like what are there is there any reason for that? Like,
yeah, I agree with you. I think it's just much more similar. We have shared many experiences about like with regards to Nigeria and Albania growing up, and a lot is actually quite similar. What you said about your upbringing is very similar to mine, which made me think about simply socioeconomic factors. Eastern Europe, Southern Europe, very different socioeconomic factors rather than Western Europe, much less developed countries in that regard. Much more community-based, I would say, at least certainly Albania. It's extremely community-based rather than kind of individualistic society that we have come to know in the UK. So probably that's why it feels more similar.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Like every time I meet someone who's like Romanian or Albanian, they're literally talking your ears off, telling you about like they want to know about you. They're inviting you for dinners at their house. It's just so different, in a good way.
I suppose so. Do you agree, Shay?
Yes, I agree. I think our weddings are also similar in the energy that people bring to those weddings. And yeah, I do think it's socioeconomic factors. A lot of the world is community based actually. We're not the outlier, we're actually the norm, and those individualistic societies are actually the outliers. So I completely agree with you both.
It's a really good point.
Yeah. No, this was such a nice conversation.
Thank you guys.
I don't want it to end.
It's always nice seeing you.
Same.
Let me ask a final roundup question.
Mhm.
DC, is there anything that you would change about your experience so far? Uh, I don't know that I feel like people's answer would be no, but maybe think critically about it and then let us know.
Such a hard question. Yeah, I feel like that's a very hard question because you never know what the outcomes would be if you were to do something differently. You mean change about my experience, like my life in general, or in terms of
No,
in terms
just
of moving countries?
yeah, just in terms of yeah. Is there anything you'd change about how you've moved countries so far? Let's bring it in.
About how I've moved countries. I think as any other 18-year-old, probably just like finishing high school and moving to another country by themselves, which is not very rare. Yeah, not rare. A lot of people do it actually. Um, I think I'm proud of that girl and how she handled it in the past. With regards to my experience in Scotland and London, not sure if this has to do with moving, but just like my experience in Scotland, probably, uh, just generally speaking, also when I look back in the past, to be a bit more chill and be more in the present rather than always thinking about the future. I think that is something that I suffered from in the past, especially as a very driven, I suppose, impatient student. And it's something that has always been a lesson in progress, I would say, to just be much more in the present. So if I were to turn back time, I would tell my my younger self to be much more in the present and much more mindful than I was. Yeah. How about you, actually? What did you say to your younger self? What did you change?
That's a very tough question as well. What would I change? I think I told myself to be more open. I mean, I think I was already very open. I did try a lot of different things, but I'd take it even a step further and be come out a little bit more, be less isolated, and just be more open to new experiences.
Yeah.
Did Jessica except the side eye?
No, these are both good answers. I don't think I have any good answers. I've never really honestly, I feel like yeah, my younger self, she fought her way to be here. Like,
I love that. There's nothing you'd change. You're the best.
I'm sure there's things I'll change 100%. I think I'll be definitely a lot more intentional about not I don't want to say community because it would sound very vague, but friendships, like one-on-one friendships, intentional about building, making friends, growing those friendships, intentional about the type of life that I want to live. Um the quality in that, like, I don't want to be someone who I presently am. I'm always at home, which I have no worries, but I'm like, maybe if when I was slightly younger, I was pushing myself to do, go out more, then maybe now I would be like one of those people. I don't know. But yeah, there's still lots of time for me to change. Try it, see how much I love or hate it. But yeah, for now, it is what it is. I did have one question that, sorry, I started to ask it and then we kind of went away. In your friendships, we've spoken about, like, all of the upsides, all of the good sides, meeting all these people from different cultures, learning something new, having this new exposure, new perspectives, but also other parts of this, like, culture shocks that you've experienced in friendships that, have been maybe super shocking or like stuff that you almost disagreed with but didn't want to be disrespectful about. Like, have you had those experiences before? Just curious.
In terms of in terms of just general culture shocks from my friendships, trying to think. I think something that was different in terms of if I compare my years in Albania and my friendships in Albania versus outside of it, was that I was faced with people who had strong faith as well. So in Albania, I never really grew up around people who believed in religion. That was my experience. A fun fact about Albania also, it was a communist country for a very long time, which means religion was prohibited, which means that it has a very high rate of atheists, so people who don't actually believe in religion, in God. So that was something different, I suppose, moving to Germany and then moving to London because my friends had faith as well. And I've seen how important and how much of a role it has played in your life and in people like Timmy and so on. So I think that was a very kind of like, something that just made me think much more about and opened me up to it. I think I probably was much more close-minded towards it, per se, just something that I didn't really think about and completely excluded. But seeing how important it is to people that I really care about, it has made me more curious about it. So I think
That's lovely. Look at me doing a bit of evangelism out here. Okay, yeah, I think that's a really nice way to wrap it up, right? This was much longer than we planned.
Oh my god.
But I told you, time flies, right? Time flies when you're
does.
having fun, and this was really fun to record.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is my first time in a podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for coming,
Thank you.
showing up, and being a wonderful guest. Cheers. Okay, how do we wrap up? See you all in the next episode.
Love you.
We're going to post, like, I think we had really good clips and stuff that we're going to share on social media. So please share this episode with your friends, family, neighbors, and help us because we're really, I think conversations like this, more people need to hear. It's very warm. It doesn't seem like we spoke about a lot, but generally I learned a lot from it. And Gisi has been, our friend for 7 years, and we're just sitting on her dining table and having this conversation where I'm learning stuff. So I think stuff like this is it's nice, it's important, and it's a great conversation starter as well. So yeah, share.
Yes, tell everybody. I think it's also good when people give us feedback, not even like in like the formal sense of the word, but just come up to us and tell us, I really enjoyed listening to that podcast. It really helps with or not. Tell us what we did wrong. It really helps.